off all cell phones. Well, you gotta leave them home.
There you go.
We have one item on the agenda tonight. The committee will continue discussions of adding a conflict of interest / qualification section to the city charter. This will require a referendum election vote to amend the charter. Go ahead, tell us all you know.
Well, I had a discussion with Bill Mayo earlier today, and I'm in a position on this issue as saying I can't tell you what you can put in the charter that would be upheld by the courts. And the reason for that is this decision that's alluded to in that municipal client alert that I've circulated this evening. I have a copy of the decision. I didn't provide you each with one, but there's a 30-page law court decision in 2013 looking at the issue of qualifications to run for municipal boards. And I'll get into some of the language of that case in a few minutes, but what that decision basically does is it doesn't analyze the question, as I would have done 2 years ago, as a home rule charter issue. It doesn't say, well, the Maine Constitution gives municipalities charter home rule, they can make charter provisions that relate to their local affairs, and that's a direct grant of constitutional authority to cities and towns in Maine to do that, and the court review of those provisions is pretty deferential. If there's a plausible reason for the provision, it's usually upheld. That would have been my analysis 2 years ago. But under this decision, the issue is analyzed by the law court as a First Amendment issue. If you impose restrictions on the right of municipal employees to seek municipal office, or if you impose qualifications on non-employees who are seeking office that prevent them from having relationships, personal or otherwise, with people who may be city employees, the court will look at that as a First Amendment issue, and it will apply, as it did in this Callaghan case, a balancing test to determine if the municipal interest being protected by that provision outweighs the First Amendment interests or rights of the person involved to seek office and of their supporters to vote for them. What's also unfortunate here from a municipal perspective is that the court didn't announce any bright line rules. It said in this case, and I'll get into the details in a moment, in the case that was in front of them, the provision was invalid because it didn't pass the balancing test. But they didn't create any bright line rule which you can then apply in every future case. And that's the problem. If you have a provision like that in your charter, and if it's challenged, or if you have a provision in an ordinance or personnel policy that applies to existing city employees and says you can't run for city council or you can't run for the RSU or anything like that, that will be looked at by on a case-by-case basis by the courts as a First Amendment issue. And so you just don't know how they're going to come out. Now, I have some language I want to read in a moment, but
just a quick question.
Yeah.
I thought, did the state make the ruling, or who made the ruling as far as the school board? I mean, they've already done it for the state, so how are they getting away with it?
It's a state statute.
State statute that you cannot run for the school board if you have Linda as a spouse?
Yep.
So, and that's for the state. So, I mean, how are they doing that? That's throughout the whole state, I believe, right, Linda?
Yeah, it's for any
and that evidently hasn't been challenged yet. I don't know that would be upheld if it were challenged at this point in the law court.
Okay.
I just don't know. The facts of the case are summarized in this memo. Basically, an existing municipal employee in South Portland wanted to run for the city school board, and evidently they're large enough. They're not an RSU or a SADA, so it's their own school board. And the personnel rules would not allow him to do that, and would not allow her to do that. So that was challenged up to the law court, and the law court ultimately held that provision, as applied to that employee, went too far. It violated her First Amendment rights to seek office. It didn't pass the balancing test, and so they struck it down. But again, that was on a case-by-case basis as applied in that case. But the prohibition was on a city employee running for a city board. And you can imagine that there is a pretty direct concern there that a municipality would want to write some language around about the possibility of conflicts of advocacy for a particular department at that board versus another department, and the types of budget discussions you might have, even discussions concerning your own job. And even though there are some concerns you can articulate, the law court still struck it down. And if you take the next step and say, as with the recent issue, that, well, we're not going to let people serve on the city council if a relative is a city employee. That's even more attenuated, in my mind, just on a simplistic sort of application than the situation in Callahan versus City of South Portland. You know, you're not prohibiting, you already have in your charter a prohibition on council members being appointed to any city position while they're council members. And that's understandable. Whether it be upheld or not, I don't know, but that's understandable. But the next step would be to say you can't serve on the council if a relative or business relation or someone else is a city employee. That's a less direct effect. That's a less direct potential conflict. So again, a very simplistic analysis of Callahan would be that if in that case an employee could not be prevented from running for a city board and from serving on that city board if elected while still holding their job with the city, then it's an even bigger stretch and an even greater likelihood that it would be struck down if you're prohibiting running for or serving on the board on the basis of these secondary employment relationships, where it's not the candidate who holds the city employment, but it's some relation to that. Again, let me read some of the language here. And I usually don't do this because reading law court decisions in public is a way to lose your audience very quickly.
Painful.
But I thought it'd be interesting. This is from the majority opinion. Justice Alexander dissented, and I'll read some of his stuff later on, but toward the end of the decision of the majority, at oral argument, the employees conceded that the city could lawfully prohibit some city employees from running for the board, for example, the city manager himself and perhaps supervisors or those employees with direct input in the city's budgetary process, but offered no principled dividing line to separate employees who could lawfully be barred from running those who could not. This is the law court speaking. We decline to usurp the role of city officials in drawing that line, beyond fulfilling our responsibility to say that under the factual circumstances of this case, the Callaghan, South Portland, these two employees could not, consistent with the First Amendment, be prohibited from running or participating in board elections. Although a blanket prohibition would doubtless be easier for the city to enforce, here it overreaches, and our acknowledging the difficulty of rendering a concise formulation or recognizing the possibility of borderline cases does not disable us from identifying cases far from any troublesome border, and quoting a Supreme Court case. That said, it is best left to the city officials more intimately familiar with the inner workings of South Portland municipal government than we to promulgate a policy that both promotes efficient government and does not offend the First Amendment rights of its employees. So the ball's back in the city's court, but then when it's challenged in court, it's going to be looked at under this balancing test, and if the judges don't like it, they'll throw it out. Now, just a little more background on this case. When it went up initially to Superior Court, the Superior Court adopted a bright line rule and struck down the whole policy as applied to all city employees. And that's the law court changed the decision in that respect. They said, we're not striking down the whole policy. We're not giving you a bright line test. Every single case will have to be evaluated on its own facts if these provisions are challenged under this balancing test. This is what Justice Levy in his dissent says about that. The court has comprehensively addressed the federal and state precedents on federal, state, and local government employees' rights to freedom of expression and the extent to which government may, as a condition of employment, limit those rights by prohibiting those who already hold one office from seeking and holding a second office with the same government entity. The court correctly observes, citing a recent 11th Circuit opinion, that the issue of constitutional protections for a government employee seeking to become a candidate for a second government office is a legal morass. Okay? That's our law court quoting the 11th Circuit to say this area of the law is a legal morass. And then further on, Justice Levy again. Oh, let me see. But then the court purports to, well, hang on, let me go further down. Holding that this is an important issue of municipal governments, whether municipal employees in the face of a municipal policy prohibiting it may seek and hold two municipal offices at once, is a factual question left to the court in each instance, fails to provide the guidance that appellate courts should provide in addressing important public policy decisions. The court leaves the issue to an after-the-fact decision by a court, a decision upon which two judicial fact-finders could reach different results, and a decision that likely would not be final until long after the election in which an individual sought to be a candidate. I wanted to quote some language because it puts me in the position as your attorney of saying, I don't know what to advise you. A lot of my job is trying to predict what will happen in court if something is challenged. I can't do that on this issue anymore because of this 2013 law court decision. I can say that the closer you can identify the interests that you're protecting by these types of provisions, the more likely it is to be upheld. For example, the current charter provision says that if you're a city council member, you can't hold any other city office of emolument. In other words, you can't hold any paid position with the city. That's fairly direct. I'm not sure that would be upheld. It might be. I think if you had a more limited provision in the charter which said you can't be a department head, you can't be a direct council appointee, and so on, and be on the city council, that would probably be upheld. Because you'd place a council member in the position of evaluating their own performance and determining their own contract and that sort of thing. So that sort of thing probably, in my estimation, would be upheld. But again, the dilemma here is it's on a case-by-case basis. And even the federal court decisions are murky, as both the dissent and the majority said in the opinion. I wanted to lead with that to let you know what you're getting into if you start trying to do these sorts of things.
Well, I think in my mind it was knowing what the state had done for the school boards, that it was going to be something as simple along those lines that you could not run for city council if you had a spouse that was employed with the city. Keep it as simple as that, because the state did pass it. I don't know what year, but it's been in the law.
It's been in the law forever.
That was the number one. Number two was that throwing out the idea that if you're an employee and whether you retired or terminate or whatever, just got done with the city, that whether it was a 3-year or 4-year before you could run for city council. That was our other idea that we were kind of floating around there. It was pretty two simple things. Just trying to figure out if it had to go to which one had to go to the voters, if both had to go, or if it's something that the council was.
If you're imposing a restriction on employees to the extent that it's valid, that discussion aside, but if you're imposing it on the employees, you would do it by personnel policy or by ordinance. You can't work for the city if. But if you're imposing it on residents as a whole in seeking city council office, if it's a secondary relationship, if you're saying you can't run for city council because your son works for Public Works, if that's the nature of the restriction, that has to be in the charter,
And
because
because
you're not tying it to the candidate's employment at
Right.
that point.
Right, and my intention when I brought it up is never to have it as a family kind of thing. It's as we look at nepotism all the way through government.
Yeah.
But what I'm looking for, when I was with a direct association as a spouse, monetary, if your spouse is working for the city, it's directly going to affect you one way or the other. I had never had an intention to make it any further than that,
Well,
because it gets truly, truly complicated, and we're a small city. It's not like we have,
And all I can say is I don't know if that would be upheld. That's really all I can say about it.
well, I guess then my question is, there has to be other communities in the state of Maine that have this in their charter.
There are, but again, no one's mounted a court challenge to those particular provisions. If they did, in light of this Callaghan decision, it might be overturned.
Right, but what I'm saying is, you were looking for exact wording or wording that might help us in overcoming some of this. I'm thinking that in those charters, there might be wording that we could borrow.
There are a number. Dexter has a provision to that effect, but once again, that's not to say that it would
Wouldn't.
be upheld.
No, I understand where you're going with that, but
That's just a chance we're
it's
going
a
to
chance.
take. Right.
If we bring it out, and I think referendum is the way to do it,
Yeah.
because I believe the voters in Old Town should have their say in what we're doing and what we're not doing in this particular case.
And again, there was a time when the courts also would have been very deferential. If the voters approved it, if it was purely local in nature and it was done through the charter amendment process, they would be very deferential in their review. If you've got some plausible reason for it, they would uphold it. But that was before this decision.
And this is the only, this is a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
and has there been any others, or?
No.
No.
But I still see this totally different. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer
Yeah.
by any means, but this is a municipal employee, and they're talking about the school, which is a
Right.
municipal
Right.
part of that city, where this is not two entities. This is just the one entity with a city council within the city employees.
Yeah, and again, my surface analysis is very simplistic and probably isn't the way that the court would apply the balancing test. But just on the face of this Callaghan decision, if it violates the First Amendment to prohibit an employee from running for and holding a position on a municipal board, then it probably violates the First Amendment to say, even though you're not an employee, you're barred from running for or holding a board position because your spouse is an employee. I mean, that's one step further removed than the employee themselves sitting on the board. And that's very simplistic. That would not be how they would apply the balancing test. They would, per the law court, they would look at all the factors that would apply, all of the interests that the city was trying to protect in doing that, and they would come out wherever they come out. And I don't know where that would be.
So if we had something that was you had talked about being head of department heads and
Right.
those things, we had to be very specific.
I think that would have a better chance, but again, that's speaking still to the council member not being those things. Now, if we said yes, you can't serve on the council if your spouse is one of those things, that might have a better chance of being.
Right, it's more specific, but the thing is then
Yeah.
too, those employees, if they had a spouse on the council,
Yeah.
would never go any further than where they are now. Is that correct? If we had that type of language in there?
I'm not.
If they were going up for, to be a director of one of the departments and stuff, they couldn't even be considered.
Well, they would disqualify their spouse from continuing to serve on the council. Yes.
Or the other way around.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That would be the effect of a provision like that. Yes.
Lori, how do you?
Since this is all about me, so I get the floor for a minute. I want to thank you for talking to me because I didn't know where you were going with this whole thing. I was kind of like tunnel vision. But what I wanted to do is make a difference for the city by running, because it was the same people running every year after year, and that's why I did this. I understand why you're saying spouses, but to be quite honest with you, I'm having a hard time with Tabitha because anything I say, I have to, I walk a fine line, I walk on eggshells because I'm afraid that either if I ask a question to somebody or state something in a council meeting, either Tabitha or Kyle gets the repercussion of it. So I have a question now, because Carol has a nephew that works for Public Works. Does that hold you back some? Because,
I just don't, I try to stay right out of it. Yeah.
however, if you voted down John Rulo's request for, I don't know, a tractor,
I did that,
does he get the repercussions from,
I don't know. I don't
you know, this is where I'm saying,
That's why I try not
because
to.
you really can't say what you want to say. You can't do the city justice by keeping your mouth shut because you're afraid for your families, and you'll do anything to protect your family. So, you see where I'm going with that? I totally get what you're saying about the spouses, because I had tunnel vision. I didn't understand what you were talking about until we had our talk.
Well, it's the same thing with, I mean, it could be even, I would hate to see that happen, by the way. That's so juvenile.
It is, but it's out there. Public perception. That you guys said that all on your thing. It's all about public perception.
But I guess, I guess my tunnel vision is I'm not looking at everybody not being able to, because again, as I said, it's a small city. We'll be limiting a lot of people with relations as
Right.
far as us large families are concerned. I was mainly looking at the spousal connection, and that was the only thing. And as far as, the administration part, as far as whether they were holding a head of a department head, that kind of thing, I can understand where you're coming with that, but I just think,
Well,
I guess it's going to need work.
Yeah.
I think the wording does, but I really believe that we really need to go forward.
The conflicts to me would be more direct and therefore more defensible as a charter limitation, where you'd have a department head who has to present a budget, or where they're directly appointed by or rated by the city council, where they have a contract that the city council has to approve. That's a more direct potential conflict than a lower level employee who is related to a council member. But as you say, that may limit their career with the city, so that their spouse can continue to serve on the council. So I think if it were limited to that, you'd have a pretty pretty good chance of it being upheld if it were challenged in court. But I can't tell you for sure. There just isn't enough case law in Maine. This is the most recent and now the controlling case as to how the court's going to deal with these things, and the court is saying case by case basis, depending on the facts of each individual case.
Can you hold on one second?
Yeah.
What happens hypothetically if Tabitha decides that there's a job opening? Say it was Patty. She is a department head. So is that going to, if I'm still on council, is that going to still prevent Tabitha from getting, even though she qualifies? You've got to think of all that.
Yeah.
See that, and that's what he was.
Right, that's what you're saying. So
Yeah.
is it really just spouse?
Well, it depends on what we would have.
It depends how the wording is.
How it's going to be worded.
That's how it's
Okay.
worded. If
I
we
mean-
went with just spouse, then it would just be the wording. But going what you've gone through recently and hearing everything, just your opinion, would you, if this doesn't even go through, it doesn't go any further, if someone asked you, what are your thoughts if they want to run for council and they had a spouse, what
On
would you
here?
tell them?
Absolutely not. Don't do it.
Just
because
because
you-
everything you've had to deal with.
Yeah, because you cannot voice your opinion because you're always second guessing if that person's going to get repercussion.
Right.
But I think we have more of a problem with ex-employees that have an agenda when they run right after they get fired or they get
So I don't wanna
done.
do that other one. That's
That,
right.
I think we have more of an issue on that than we do on husband and wife.
Yeah.
No,
It's
that was.
They're different issues, don't you think? I know. we're not-
They are
I'm-
different
Totally
issues.
different issues.
They're
Different.
totally,
Neither,
but they're
neither one
both-
of which do I think you're gonna get anywhere on.
But
I
they're
mean,
not-
obviously, if they're gonna let an
I
employee
agree.
run for office,
Right.
they ain't gonna shoot an ex-employee down for 2 seconds. It isn't gonna hold any water. We're wasting our time totally on that one, as I'm concerned. I might be wrong,
That's if
but,
they take it, someone challenged.
because they're not working for the city anymore, right? What grounds are you gonna hold them on if they worked for a city a year ago? And you're gonna say they're automatically
I don't know, I'm
vindictive?
just saying that all I was saying is that they're different, they're
They're different
different issues.
issues.
Yes.
Different
And
issues
I'm
to
saying
the
that that
council.
issue's dead in the water as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
After hearing that court case, there's just no way you're
No way
gonna
you can do
uphold
it.
that one.
Yeah.
It's gone. And as far as I'm concerned, the other one's pretty much gone because we're talking spouses and they're talking the individual running. And I don't see how you're ever gonna make that
Yeah,
fly.
I don't see how you can, how we could restrict with this ruling. I don't see how it would pass the First
But
Amendment
how's the
piece.
state done it? The state did it
With
with
the
all the school
schools.
boards, and it's gone all these
No one's
years.
challenged
No
it.
one's challenged it.
But the worst we
challenged,
could
they're
do
being
is put it in our charter, and if
then
they
civil
challenge
challenge
it,
it.
right?
Right.
There's nothing to say that we can't put that in our charter.
No, there isn't. You certainly can pass the charter amendment.
What you're
and then-
telling us is that you're not gonna say we're not gonna have a lawsuit.
Well, I mean, I can never say that. Anybody can
No,
sue.
but I mean,
I
really,
don't, I can't give you a good prediction as to how that lawsuit would come out.
That's right.
Right.
That's what it is. I mean, you know,
And if, as there's communities around, like you said, Dexter, was it Dexter you said has one?
I know of that one because I was town attorney there for 10 years, and I dealt with that
And-
specifically. Yeah.
And after this discussion, it's one of those things that, yeah.
You have a handful of people that live in the city of Old Town that work for the city of Old Town. What are the chances of this coming up again? This is the first time, I asked Patty this a while ago. She goes, I don't even ever remember having a spouse run.
so by virtue of, if we put it in our charter, it would probably never be challenged.
Exactly.
And I don't know why you'd go to all the work of having a referendum and everything else to put something in your charter that you know if it's gonna get challenged, you're gonna get beat up on it.
But I'm not this is one ruling. This is one ruling. This does not represent how some other judges might see this, correct?
some other law court judges, and that turnover is not very rapid on that particular court. And it was a 6-to-1 decision, so you'd have to replace quite a few of them before they would change their mind. Now, but the point at the trial level, Superior Court level, you would have one justice trying to decide under the balancing test if the municipal interest was sufficiently strong to outweigh the candidate's First Amendment rights. And who knows, how do you make that determination if there's no bright line test? It's almost a gut call. And I don't know on any given day how any given Superior Court judge is going to come out on a gut call.
Joe, you want,
Yeah, if I may. You were talking about.
can you come up to the mic, please?
Okay. What about the electorate? The people who vote? They are the ones that put the council members in place. And usually they know pretty much any connection. You're going to limit their ability to put forth a candidate they think is good because their relative works for the city. You talk about limiting First Amendment rights. That, I think, is a big one. So I don't think this is a good thing for the city.
I brought up during one meeting about, I guess 2 meetings ago, when it was, that Lori was the #1 vote getter during the election, so people knew that that Kyle was her husband and
Tabitha was my
Tabitha's
daughter.
daughter.
Yeah, I mean-
People knew that the only reason why I've been actually thinking about it is because I know what Lori's been going through recently, so I'm thinking more about that part of it.
I don't appreciate what Lori's been going through. But from an outside view,
Right.
we are, as we said, a small town. We pretty much know what's going on. So if we, as a group, decide that this person will be good on the city council and provide the kind of leadership we need, even though they have a relative that works for the city, I don't see a problem. Don't forget, you're only on there for 3 years.
But I'm not saying relative, I agree, that's way too broad, I'm just looking for the spouse, not relative.
I include the spouse in that, okay? If I was working for the city, my wife couldn't run for city council. Okay, and she had support, that support would be negated by an ordinance. Their rights to put forth a candidate and vote for that is negated by that ordinance, and I think that's a limitation of freedom.
Thank you. I agree with you. I think if you're a candidate viable enough to run for city council and get the votes, then you ought to have the chance. Yeah.
I think it's very important to note that if during the term of the 3 years that it turns out that there's such a problem with that individual, I think the voters will have the common sense to remove the individual at the end of their term, not put them back.
Not always. We've had
Not
bad
always.
times in the past.
Yeah, but I mean, there's that's a balance. That's a balance to it.
Yeah.
Depends on where you are on the ballot,
Right.
depends on what
That's
election you're
That's right.
Yeah.
running in.
And I would say, hearing Lori speak, and that's what I would have asked you if you were here when we discussed it the
Right.
first time, how you felt about it, because no one's denying your service to the council, and I
appreciate
hope
that.
you understand that.
Absolutely.
And it's just that, I know how hard it's been for you, and that's too bad. And I think if, I don't know how you avoid that, but I still think if we put it in the charter, it will discourage, and I don't think that, and like Patty and Lori said, I don't remember it happening before either.
Sorry to stir the pot.
Yeah.
Why? It's a good thing.
It's a good thing, I agree, it's always a good thing. Discussion is always good.
So would it be appropriate for us to take a straw poll here to see if we want to go on with this or quit at this point in time?
It's gonna have to go on to the full council anyways, correct? To even get that, to go forward, to go to the voters, so it'd have to get approved off of this committee anyways.
Well, it can
That's
still
fine.
go forward to the council with you not the approval.
I mean, and I said this either last meeting, the meeting before, or maybe it was just you and I talking, Linda, on the side, that I think no matter what, and it sounds like no matter what, the voters have to do this anyways. I don't think it should be us making this decision. I think it's up to the voters to make the decision, and personally, I think it should go forward and let the voters see what they decide to do. That's just my 2 cents, and I wouldn't have thought this way until recently, having to talk to Lori as much as I do, to see what she's had to go through. So I understand what you say, Joe, and I appreciate it, but I think it should be up to the voters to decide this. So
And it's not like we have to have a special election, right,
Yeah,
Patty?
right.
That's right.
It's not an election just for this.
No, because you got the
Yeah,
school up.
right. Mhm.
I'm not on this
So you're
committee,
putting that in form of a motion?
Oh, neither one of us are.
It should go to the full council. I mean, whether it gets approved or not, but it needs to be, I recommend that we forward this to the full council for approval to, I don't have anything in front of me, but to go out to get the charter change, have the voters decide on the charter change.
Do we have that seconded?
On the committee.
Who's on the committee? Smart, not all, Peterson, and Mahan.
Okay.
I would say I'd have to not stay away, recuse from it.
So if there isn't a second, then it dies.
So I guess,
It does.
how does it go to the full council if it dies in committee?
It comes to council.
Not recommended.
Without
Well,
recommendation,
it has to get, no, it
correct?
has to get seconded, right?
Well, you have to make you can make another motion saying it's going forward without their recommendation.
That's up to you. I can put it on a council agenda, even though it wasn't recommended.
Okay. I thought it had to get second, then get shut down, but,
I mean, basically, at the committee level, all you're doing is making a recommendation. You're not making
Right.
okay.
any motions per se, other than a recommendation.
Okay, so you can bring that forward then, just not recommended at this point.
Put this baby to sleep.
So there was no second?
No.
Is there anything else to come before this committee? If not, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? We're adjourned.
I'd like to call the City of Old Town Finance Committee to order. Second item on the agenda is the Food Hub Grant. The LLC is looking for authorization to spend $6,000 to join in with surrounding communities that are applying for a Food Hub Grant. Any information on that?
Ron Harriman has been working on this with the LLC. Basically, this involves the Bangor Chamber, City of Bangor, Orono, basically the greater Bangor area, University of Maine, Good Shepherd. There's a bunch of organizations involved in this. What they're trying to do is have a market analysis done and also apply for a grant for a building. What they're trying to do is bring together in the region farmers and producers basically to set up some place where they know how much fresh vegetables that the University of Maine needs on a daily basis, the hospitals need, Husson College, bring all that together within about a 100-mile radius of the greater Bangor region. So it gives the opportunity for farmers in the area to be able to supply that stuff,
Oh.
and then hopefully be able to feed off from that some of the things that we've talked about with having consistency in farmers markets and stuff. They'll be able to supply a lot more of that locally, and to restaurants too would also be included in that.
That's great.
So the
They
LLC.
have one of those in the southern part of the state already, or the western part. Isn't there one going someplace?
I'm not sure.
I think so,
'cause it-
that includes the local farmers.
Yeah.
Is each entity putting up the 6,000?
What's that?
Is each group putting up the
No, it's
money?
different amounts of money. Orono's putting up 6. We are, the university's doing in-kind. and helping on some of the market analysis. There's different variations of that.
Yeah. Just curious.
But when you say a hub, we don't know where this hub is going to be, correct? If they,
It'll be in the Bangor region until they do the market analysis and look at that whole thing. I'm not sure where it's going to end up.
So my question is, I know I'm not on the committee, but what benefit is the city of Old Town specifically going to see from this?
Well, I mean, for one thing, hopefully any of the restaurants here in town would have access to fresh vegetables that are grown locally. A farmer's market that we potentially could have vegetables that would be here.
schools could be part of that.
Schools. And that's what they're trying to do, is put together, it's difficult you may have farmers that are 70 miles away from the Old Town region that, whatever they might specialize in, turnips or whatever, it's hard for them to be able to sell that to RSU here because they don't really know how much produce they need versus actually bringing that all into one food hub. Schools here, Orono, this whole region could benefit from this.
This comes out of their budget anyways, right? Out of their
It's out of their reserve
account.
Yeah.
And that's why that's up here, is they can't spend that money. I can't spend that money. It's in a reserve account, so ultimately, they have to get approval, so.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna make a motion.
Oh. I think being part of the Good Shepherd Food Bank and doing the things that we do at school, with all of the things that are happening, one of the things that our kids are really lacking is fresh produce. So whether it's potatoes or broccoli or whatever from Aroostook County, I really think schools could use it, but I also know the food banks could use it because that's much better to give out than it is if it's canned goods and stuff all the time. Because there's another whole new learning curve on how to cook that, but that's still something that can be done within the community. I think it's a good idea. Gonna make the motion, Dave?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I make a motion to the full council to authorize the LLC to spend $6,000 to join in with surrounding communities that are applying for a food hub grant.
I second it.
It's been a motion and a second. All those in favor? So moved. And last thing on the agenda, adjournment.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? So moved. Carol did, didn't she? Did you
I
second?
second it, yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
hear you.
Sorry. It's louder.
Do you want the gavel?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
He
That's
needs
all
his
right.
hammer back.
No, I was gonna use the pen. Patty, let me know when you're
Oh,
ready.
it's in the back.
Okay.
You all set with spell check?
We get a break, that was pretty intense.
Yeah.
You what?
Did we get a break? That was pretty intense.
Jeez. I call to order the February 18, 2015 special council meeting. Flag salute. Councilor Nettle, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Silent roll call has been taken and a quorum is present.
Approval of minutes. There are no minutes. Petitions, communications, and citizens' requests. At this time, is there anyone from the audience that would like to discuss an item? Please come forward. Okay. Reports, Council President. So as you know, I just want to let everybody know publicly that Lori, Council Smart, has submitted her resignation from the council. It'll be official this Friday, the 20th.
Yep.
We want to thank you very, very much for your service. You've done a great job, and we'll definitely miss you.
Thank you. Good luck.
We always need it. By saying that, I'm going to have Patty just take a minute to explain how this will go forward to replace Councilor Smart.
Okay. Because it's more than 6 months before the next regular election, a special election will need to be called for a candidate to fill an unexpired term. So considering that we have the June school referendum, that's the perfect time to do it, and it'll be no additional cost at, at this time. So that's good news. So that will have to be called for by the city council. Whether it's, you say March?
We can start the process the first meeting in March,
Okay, all right.
and there'll be plenty of time to do everything. Okay. Thank you.
Let me just add, because that will be a small election, but just to weigh, I mean, there's a big difference monetary-wise whether I use machine ballots or hand count ballots. So I guess I would ask you guys, or you folks, which you prefer me to do.
I would assume you'd use machine.
So would I.
I would assume. Wait, you trying to say you don't have money in the budget? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah.
I think the boss will
I thought
take
you were
care of
gonna
that.
ask us to-
I mean, I can relook at that, but just, I don't know if I can, let me check on that, because ideally, it would be nice if we could put the schools referendum on there too, which I think we can, because their wording
On the
is-
same ballot?
On the same
Yeah.
ballot, because
Yeah.
their wording is pretty generic, and there's no dollar figures or anything on that, so I think I can do that, but let me check into it. If not, sometimes it's harder for the workers to have to deal with a paper ballot and a machine ballot.
Right.
Sometimes it's easier to just go either or.
Right.
And then,
So if you can do the RSU with the
Yeah.
machine, you'll do machine. If not, then just do it paper.
yeah.
And I'm sure that if you need,
I mean, of course, I won't have to have as many ballots, but it'll cost probably around $400 for programming for the machines, probably another $1,000 for, the ballots. And then usually it's around 2,000 to 2,500, depending on how long we are,
Right.
for the employees. So I'll look at my budget tomorrow, and I might be okay with it. I know I've got 2,600 left for payroll. I haven't really looked at the other lines to see if I exhausted those in November or not.
if you need any, the boss will take care of it.
Or I can
Wow.
come back to you and let you take care of
Yeah,
it.
Either way. Okay, standing committees. Any committee meetings for anybody? City councilors, EJ, how about an update on the food drive?
Just a quick update, and I can let Travis talk a little bit more about the 28th at Hannaford. Food drive is in the works. We're collecting food, all the various locations throughout the city and the schools, Y,
Yes.
your place. The hockey game is on Friday, so hopefully
Good.
athletics is going to collect some food there. Just for those who got tickets, the university, there's no such thing as a $5 ticket. So they took all the tickets, divided it in half. So some tickets say $10 and some say 0. So for those who bought a ticket for $5 and it says 0,
They're still gonna get
they're
in.
still going to get it. I wasn't giving out free tickets and collecting $5. So I just want to say that for the record.
Wow,
I just
all
want
right.
to say that.
Putting that on the
I
record,
just wanna put it on
okay,
the
all
record.
right.
We don't have the capacity.
To do a
Did you get that,
$5
Irene? I
check.
want to make sure that's in the. But on that, things are going great. And did you want to say something, Travis, about the 28th?
Just that we're gonna be in front of the Hannaford all day is the plan.
Make it official, Travis Roy.
Travis Roy.
Thank you.
We're gonna be in front of the Hannaford all day with a city vehicle with two city vehicles with banners on them, says Old Town Community Food Drive. It went very well last year. We got an email out to staff, and I know EJ spoke to you, Councilor Rocha spoke to you guys about coming if you'd like for any part of the day. Probably gonna be cold. I almost promise it will be based on this year. But we'll be there from 8 in the morning till 6, I believe, is the time period. U-Haul has donated a truck, so if we overfill the vehicles we have there, we can put it in the truck, and we'll be able to keep it in there until we deliver everything on Monday.
Great.
So,
How we coming on the heated tent?
Yeah.
still working on that.
Still working on that
We have
one.
tents.
I said heated.
It's a large heated building right there.
Could we
Thank you,
come
sir.
sit in the car?
Yeah,
Don't
is
do
that count
cold
just sitting in
well.
the
I
car?
don't
Yeah.
do cold very well.
Anybody else? City Council, Stan?
Yeah. The thought occurred to me that we've got the National Whitewater Rafting Championships coming here this summer,
Did you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
and maybe we should have a committee on what we could do for signage or making sure the city's clean, or is there something doing all of
Is there a
that?
committee already?
Didn't we, wasn't Ron, didn't we?
Yeah, Ron Harriman is working.
Working on that so that we can pick up some publicity from it? Because it appears to me, if we're gonna do some economic development, this might be a
Yeah,
good thing to tie
We had talked about that,
broaden
and,
our horizons.
yeah, and we had talked about that, and also, this is Old Town's 175th anniversary.
Tying everything
and-
in.
Yeah, and so tying that in with it, and, yeah.
So
Because that's a big event.
But I mean, you're on a committee that's
yeah,
part of
yeah,
that. Are
yeah.
you on anything to do with Ron with any of this?
On the LLC.
Yeah,
I
and,
don't know if- I don't know if specifically for this.
We just want to
Or
make
can
sure
be.
somebody's on it.
and I think the city should be a sponsor. I already talked to you
Yeah.
about that, didn't I? And I think
Absolutely.
the city should be a sponsor of it. But we do need to, I know that Ron did, Scott Phillips did meet with
Ron, yep.
and we're on to that.
So just ask Ron if he needs somebody from the council. I mean, I know Carol's on a bunch of the committees as it is, but just in case if there's a specific one that's doing this. But I know it seems like there's a couple different committees
Yeah,
mixed in
there's-
from what
yeah,
I can tell.
yeah.
So what I'm hearing is you're volunteering to be on that.
That's not what I
Oh,
said.
okay.
No, that's
Stan-
not. No,
Stan-
Stan spoke first, so he would be the first choice.
We need to do something, that's all
Yes,
I'm
no,
saying.
absolutely.
Nope, he's
Absolutely.
working on
Carol's
that.
been telling me that, so I know you talked to Bill.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Any other city councilors? No. Okay. City attorney.
Two things, we should be doing the dangerous building hearing at the council meeting, first or second of March.
Oh, okay.
The notices for service went out early last week to the sheriff's departments in 2 counties. Don't have them back yet, so I don't know for sure, but, I don't have return of service yet, but if we get that back, that'll, that hearing will go forward. And I don't, Bill wants to mention, we had an offer of a compromise amount from Spirit Aviation on a couple of old, small claim judgments that we had against them. And that check is coming the next day or two.
Oh,
Checks in the mail.
checks in the mail.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Thank you.
Very small check.
Well, still, thank you.
Don't spend it.
Special committees, school board liaison, city manager.
Airport master plan, for Stantec's, part of it is done now. They've brought that forward, presented it to us. That now has to go forward. It's, Maine DOT has that. They have to review it. And it goes from them to the FAA for the FAA to review it to make sure that everybody's on the same page. But there shouldn't, hopefully won't be any problems as it gets reviewed. We haven't heard anything back from the state yet, so hopefully that will continue moving forward.
Good.
There will be a grant that will come back from the fire department. Steve just got notice of it, so we couldn't get it on for tonight's meeting for approval. Basically, he has money in his budget to match. It's a 50-50 grant, but it's to replace some of their firefighting clothing, particularly for wildfires, shirts, pants. It's $1,265.
How much?
$1,265, so it'll be coming back in March for approval on that. That's it for me.
And my understanding was, Patty and Steve can jump in, but when you were off, you told me about the fireworks will come to the council in March. Was it March?
Yes,
Yes.
Dave Russell is working on putting it into ordinance form. And he's almost done with that.
Okay, so that'll be at the March meeting.
Yeah, and he actually has that. He sent that out. Police is reviewing it, fire is reviewing it, just if they have any issues on it, so.
And once we pass it, if I understand it, it was the state will accept it within 60 days after we pass it?
Actually, they'll accept it. It's we have 60 days to notify them, that's all.
Oh,
So they
okay.
Put it on their website that Old Town has an ordinance along with the other communities.
Okay, so definitely be in place for the summer.
We're all set if you approve.
Okay.
If you approve it, it'll.
If
be
we
in place
approve
this
it,
summer.
yes, yes. I have my fingers crossed on this one. Any questions for Bill on anything, guys? No? Okay, consent agenda, public hearings, old business. New business, 2 items. Number 1, the city council consider a real estate abatement of taxes due to part of the lot was assessed to Red Shield that was retained by the Penobscot River Restoration Trust. Councilor Roach.
Resolve, the Old Town City Council hereby abates real estate taxes as follows. Red Shield acquisitions, year 2014, amount $269.97, type RE.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Stan, discussion. Bill, Travis.
What this is when the Penobscot River Restoration Trust purchased the hydro dam from the mill, they decommissioned the dam and then returned the building and the land to Red Shield for $1. But what nobody noticed at the time, meaning Red Shield and myself, was that they kept a sliver of land, literally a sliver of land, around, if this is the hydro dam, around the hydro dam. And the purpose of that is so no one could ever recommission that hydro dam. Because you wouldn't own the land you would need to have the input in to make the dam operate. So they kept this sliver. And when Xpero was going through their due diligence to purchase the mill, the property, their attorneys saw that there's a difference in the deed going out and the deed coming back. So we researched that I can abate this year, but only the council can abate last year. So that's why this is before you.
Gotcha. Any questions for Travis? No discussion. All those in favor? None opposed. Last item for tonight, the city council will consider going into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters. Councilor May.
Resolve, the Old Town City Council hereby approves going into executive session pursuant to MRSA Title 405, Section 6A, for the purpose of discussing personnel matters.
Okay, is there a second? John, discussion? All those in favor? Unopposed. Okay.